everyone. So anyone who knows me from the past knows that I'm all about my shoes. I'm a shoe person, but I got on my designer tennis shoes today because I put one foot in front of the other on New Year's Day and cracked my ankle in 3 places. Oh. I now have a proud owner of a plate and 13 screws. So I am pleased. I made a goal when I knew this was on the books. And me and Enrique talked. He says, you think you're still going to be able to make it? I said, I will be there. And I will be standing up and I'll be walking. And it's all about making goals and being determined. So when you hear yourself talked about by a dear friend like Enrique, you just kind of sit there and say, was that me? But it really is, right? And that's why my presentation has as the last word in it, you. So anything that I do is about making the better you, the best you. And my firm is about that. He talked about my excitement. My great excitement is walking right now. I'm also greatly excited about being a proud parent of 3 and grandparents now of 5. So, and they range from 20 months to 13 years old. And the 13-year-old and the 20-month-year-old in the same house. So I want you all to figure out what that feels like. It's not pretty. So it's been an exciting life, but it's about the whole me. And I want to talk to you about the whole you. Being an entrepreneur pulls a lot from who we are, our energy, our center, and our strength. So the idea of doing the right things in the right way is something that you should be determined to do with frequency, with eloquence, and by design. And so with my firm, when I talk about our philosophy, the name of my firm is LCA Enterprises and Consulting. And the LCA stands for Learn, Create, and Achieve. You see our philosophy, we talk about this concept of the curiosity is going to connect education to your aspirations and drive you to be your best self. We do this with teams, with firms, and with energy, and with vigor. When we talk about learning, we want you to view the aspect of professional and personal development to be a fundamental need, actually a passion to learn, because when you're learning, you're growing. When you decide not to learn, you're reducing yourself to your fears and the things that you think could happen. Possibilities come from the aspect of learning. Then you want to create something. So you learn something, right? Let's do something with it. Create an innovation that requires a keen focus on planning and being the cutting edge. And that's what you all are doing here. You're creating something that starts with you. And the conversations we're going to have today are giving you new perspectives, insights, and directions around people. The final thing I want you to think about is achievement, because getting from here to there, not by chance, fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So it's not by chance. It is something that you're pulling together and putting together. And from that, you'll achieve, you'll succeed. And in succeeding, you'll decide to wash, rinse, and repeat, and do it all over again, because it feels good. All right, so that's a little bit about my firm and me and what we're all about. So in the end, right, Lee Iacocca. Anybody know that name? Anybody old as me? Okay, good. So Lee Iacocca, if you watch Back to the Future, right, the DeLorean, he was a part of that. That was towards the end of his career. The Ford Mustang, that's him. That's his brainchild and conception. And so he was very, very controversial. You know, you read his autobiography, you'll see why I say that, so grab it. But there's something he says that I have to say back to everyone. You know, in the end, all business operations can be reduced to 3 words: people, product, and profits. We're running a business, right? People, product, and profits. But without the first one, the other 2 simply don't matter.
So maybe you would choose to be on the other side of the room so that you can, you know, be better, right? With the, yeah.
Thank you. All right. So think about that. And think about right people, right roles, right time, right reason. Right people, right roles, right time. And then that 4th one is right reason. You don't hear that often, but I want you to think about that. There's a right reason. All right, so let's look at some important, so why are people? Like, what is that all about? Retaining your people, having your people in place. This is hot off the press. These came out 2 months ago from several different resources that I'm referencing here. And these are retention facts and stats. And this is an important look because this is from 2021, post-COVID-ish. COVID issue. And it's kind of important to look at what the numbers are saying to us. So 57% of the workers are open to new job opportunities. 57% of people who are working right now are open to new job opportunities. I'm here to tell you those opportunities should be if you are putting people first in your business instead of outside of the business. That's the risk. 57% is a big number. What are you doing about it? The top reason employees leave is lack of opportunity. Well, yeah, right? That makes sense. And if you continue the conversation, 28% of employees do not have opportunities to grow. So more than half the people that are looking for opportunities aren't even being heard or listened to. There's no storyboard here for them. So 36% of the employees are doing what they do best. Not good too. Good news there. 36 though. What's happening to the other 67? 54% of employees who quit felt undervalued. Felt undervalued. Aspirations meaning what? Probably not much. 74% of employees reported burnout at work. That's a big number, bigger than ever. The number was probably pre-COVID, somewhere around 48 to 50. It never was a nice number, but look at it now. 52% of employees, managers, could have done something about it. And something as simple as saying, how are you today? How are you feeling? I saw something in the news that happened in Buffalo that might be something that impacted you. How are you feeling about that? Simple as that conversation. Being brave, bold, and interested in your people is sincerely important. 52%. So that also means that 52% of the employees are quitting because of their boss. It translates to that. That number used to be, and Nikki knows I used to quote it every year in the 7 years that he knew me. When he and I first started working together 10 years ago, that number was somewhere around 38%. Each year it gradually kicked up about 2%. It leaped to 52%. So important to think about. It's always been an issue, but look at it now. They're quitting because of you. And the boss is the direct boss, sure. But when you're talking about a small entrepreneurial firm, it's you, it's the CEO and the culture they're driving. When you're starting up, that fun time of startup where everybody's working for too many hours. 49% of employees didn't discuss key topics before they left. They also left like this. I'm out. See ya. I wouldn't want to be here. That's important too. You're not getting data. And many times 49% leave because they're not even asking them why they left. We're just going to churn and burn. And here's the problem with churn and burn. Replacing employees' onboarding costs is 1/2 to 2 times their annual salary. Whatever you're paying that individual, you get to do it all over again at a cost. Not even talking about the cost of goodwill and the colleagues that work around that blank space, picking up the slack. So the risk is high. The storyboard of not reacting to the importance of your human capital as what they are, the resource and foundational value to your business early, right at the beginning. Only 14% of employees fully trust that their pay is fair. Only 14%. No, a lot of folks think it is fair. 50% of the companies, not on here, I didn't add that slide. We know that 52% of the companies that are in the surveys that I'm gathering here, and by the way, these are worldwide surveys, they do include Europe and parts of Asia. 52% of the employees, 52% of the companies do not publish bands and ranges for salaries and jobs. So in my experience, in my 25 years of working in these different firms and businesses, I can tell you that it usually isn't fair because nobody's asking. Women in particular are brutalized by this aspect. You moved to another job to get more money, but you were already being underpaid at the job that you were in, and you didn't know you were being underpaid, so now you're still underpaid. It's like squashers and people of color, very much so, impacted by this. So when you think about running your own business, think about these kinds of thoughts and why they influence people powering the process. So today we're going to talk about that, some things that we can do that I'd like for you to think about when you think about your company, a company that has your name on it. If it's yourn, what can it look like? How can we reimagine it early? I want to story tell one big thing. I have a client in Seattle, picked him up a couple of years ago, and he got a second round of venture capital funding, $750 million in the pharmaceutical space, an idea, concept. And he finally was able to hire people, my God. And so he came to me and he said, so what should I be thinking about? I'm going to tell you what I told him. But in the end, after he and I finished speaking, here's what he said to me. He turned and he says, you know, I'm not going to be a CEO. I'm going to be a CCO, Chief Culture Officer. Not only that, I'm going to bring in a CPO, a Chief People Officer, to hang out with my CFO to keep honest. So that's what I want you to think about when you're talking about making these decisions early with people in mind. You don't have to be a CCO, but I just thought that was an interesting revelation that he had from this conversation. So we'll talk about business and workforce life cycles. We'll talk about culture design and your MVP, 2Ds, mission, vision, value, and purpose. We'll talk about leadership and social responsibility and how they connect to the storyboard that I'm sharing with you today. We're then going to have conversations and a little bit of Q&A, and then I'm going to run out of here because I got to get on the plane at 1:13. That's my magic number. Keep it in your head, 1:13. So let's talk about business life cycle. You've probably seen this before. There's complexity that's involved in 5 stages of how a company evolves. And it always evolves this way. And remember that wash, rinse, and repeat thing I talked about? When you get to maturity, you get to do it all over again, because now you're going to infuse innovation and get started with something else. A lot of times, my personal opinion is that's when the CEO has to go. When you get to expansion, get them out of there. Let's get some new blood in to get new ideas. I personally think they should have term limits, but that's just me. All right, so when you look at that maturity model, we've seen these words: development, that's the conceptualization phase, that's the idea phase. Ideations are happening. What if, a lot of what ifs, a lot of running of numbers. Startup phase is where you get some cash infusion, and now you're able to bring some of those what ifs to life. Then there's the growth phase, when the what ifs become product lines, delivery, services, potential. And then there's the expansion, this ability to be bigger tomorrow than you were yesterday because your ideas have legs. They have the ability to do something different. And then finally, there's this maturity, when you're large and in charge. Think about Cheerios. Cheerios started with just a little old guy. Go to the shelves now, and they got 2 shelves and 22 different products, 22 different ways to get your Cheerios on. But when we talk about how that happens, people become important. And so if we were to lay in, what I'd like you to think about is how you introduce your workforce, with or without money, by the way. How you introduce your workforce to these phases. Here's what I'd like for you to consider. In the development phase, you and maybe it's VCs, maybe it's your mama, your daddy, your garage, I don't know. Whatever's happening, it's happening. But cash infusion happens and some things need to happen pretty quickly. The consulting model is a strong one at that phase. And the consulting model that I propose is kind of like my friend in Seattle. It's the CEO, CFO, and the CHRO. However, the model today, many venture capital firms that you talk with will say that that third one needs to be your general counsel. And I would argue if you got the CHRO in, you might not need the general counsel. So have a third party relationship, advising you on going public and shares and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm proposing to you to consider, when you put people first, that CHRO is introduced pretty quickly. Someone with an ability to understand how to design a HR department that grows with your idea and your products. You heard Enrique talking about an acquisition that we did together. And he was very humble about his role, and I'm probably going to be humble about mine. But together, I mean, they left us hanging. They really did, because they believed in us, which was good. But there were 68 angry people in the room. And they weren't angry at the end of the meeting. And there's a reason for that, because they decided that the 2 best people to put in front of them were people. But if you're not a people, how can you do that? And so that's why I'm encouraging you to get that understanding early. Look, everybody isn't an extrovert. Everybody can't stand in front of and talk for 5 hours. Everybody's not that way. You may not be that way, but it's who you put around you. That's fundamentally important at this, especially at the early stages. Return on investment is a word you'll hear ad nauseum. And if you're able to invest in your people and play to those statistics that I showed you earlier, to retain them at the door, to get that factor of their knowledge built right at the early stages and you're growing together in those 3 areas is significantly important. Inside the organization is as important as looking outside the organization. When you move into the growth phase, now you're able to expand even further. You have some ideas, you're creating org charts. If your HR person was with you in the first place, they can help you freaking draw the boxes. When you bring them in from the outside at that stage, which is what often happens, they're bringing in bad habits, old habits, or habits that may not fit you. There's not one size fits all when you're thinking about people and culture to drive your success. So when that happens, there's different things that we see introduced. You see the asterisk here: CEO, CFO, CHRO, General Counsel, CMO, Chief Medical Officer, depending on your product. Your commercial person is in there somewhere. Generally, commercial workforces are consultant or commissioned at that point, but they're still important, depending on what you're selling, right? You know, consulting services is different. So there's different types of avenues here. You see in that middle box, there's 5 C-suite members. We introduce our R&D and discovery department. You do want to have that there. Your consultants, your contractors, and your outside service providers become significantly important at this stage. So your professional fees are going up, but you're leveraging outside resources to bring them in. Your budget that you're operating with, your operating costs, are really still looking at the value of the right people around the table, whispering in your ear. Super important at the early phases. When you get to expansion and maturity, this is where you then move into the standard FTE, full-time equivalent, sometimes part-time equivalents to models. Now, the future of the world is changing. Just a footnote here. I had a slide I was thinking about adding. I told Ahmad that I'll say a footnote here. The world is shifting. Thanks to COVID, working from home is huge. This ability for individuals to be able to be supremely effective using platforms like this is extremely important to consider as well. And so this is an opportunity when you start thinking about standardizing your full-time equivalent and what your resources will look like, where they'll work from. Brick and mortar may not necessarily be needed to be a driving part of your model. There may be other ways. And again, having an HR person at the table earlier can have that thinking throughout the process of your growth. All right, so you heard me talking about right people. So the staffing philosophy I want you to consider is this: talent optimization, not talent management. Talent management is the process of doing the work, is the tactic, but optimization is the strategy. You want to optimize every single element of how people contribute and deliver to your company. People come in different forms. They're vendors, they're suppliers, they're investors, they're noisy people, they're your employees, they're your staff. So it's an essential facet to business success. It requires a strategic and operational process improvement thinking. Wash, rinse, and repeat thinking. It encompasses the who, what, when, and why. And so when we look at this model, right people means things like talent acquisition, team competency thoughts, delineations, determinations, sourcing strategies. Sourcing is the way you bring in talent pools, diverse talent pools. We'll talk about that as we close and why that's important. Pipeline management, hiring management, prep, selection integrity, you see that, role advertisement. This is the who. How do we get the who's? Who's the who's? And what do they look like? Then there's the right roles, which is the what. So who is doing what and in what way? What are the requirements? And so there's steps there that are delineated, understanding exempt, non-union, non-exempt. All of these classifications are supremely important. The earlier you have a grasp on those, the better opportunity you can mix it up to save money and at the same time build your employee base to grow with you. Build them to grow with you. Right time, right reason, when, and then right reason, the one I told you don't hear about, is why you do it. Why are you doing any of this? Like, why? I told you what the Iacocca said, but why are you doing it? What's relevant to what you're up to? And the why is important because that is the underpinning. The right reason or why underpins all and gives purpose to every step that you really must take to create a workforce that works. Works well, not works hard, works well. Why does all that matter? I told you about my CCO story, my Chief Culture Officer. And here's what I want you to consider about that, and it's part of what certainly I think about all the time. Corporate culture is the only sustainable competitive advantage that is completely in the control of the entrepreneur. You can replace that with department heads. You can replace that with CEO. The leader of people has to appreciate a great place to work and the way to build it. And so we'll talk a little bit about mission, vision, value, and purpose, and how that all sort of works together in this model and design in the conversation that we're having together. So purpose is why you're even doing this. Perhaps you're working with, thinking about innovating a design to save a life, create a therapy that extends a life or makes life bigger. You're innovating with that purpose in mind. So establish that person. That's the beginning of your journey. Therefore, there's a mission that needs to be established. But the mission comes because you have to first decide on your vision. So we go purpose and vision, and then the journey to get there is your mission. Your mission creates a roadmap. That's why I have a road symbolized for you. Twists and turns, you'll be designing it, two-step plan, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I told Ariki one of the things I'm proud about right now is my business. When I started it 3 years ago, I'm in my 3rd year now. I sort of made some flags in the sand about how much I wanted to earn and how many clients I wanted to affect and what that mix of my portfolio of clients should look like. And I'm really excited. This came out of business meetings that I'm at 168% growth to what I originally decided. And I remember thinking on the plane, wanting to share this to you because I wanted you to think about the fact that I was thinking about all of this and how to make folks better and word of mouth. I haven't even opened my website yet. I haven't had to. Because I thought about the process and the people and the journey from the very beginning. And I talk about it every 3 months, every 3 months, every 3 months. It changes, and that's okay. It should change, because you should be growing. The new job of the CEO and senior management team is not to hand company culture down from on high, but to prioritize it and allocate the resources for it. So yes, on high certainly is aware of it, Chief Culture Officer, but then something else has to happen. It's not just spoken by saying, this is our culture. Culture, just like safety and diversity, is everybody's job, not one person's job. And that's the message here. When you start thinking about the mission, you have to then think about those values that contribute to this MVP model that I'm describing to you. And there they are on the tree. At the bottom, you're building a culture of, and I sometimes say culture of inclusion. That's what I like to think about. You want people to feel included rather than excluded. Not just your employees either, by the way. Anybody you touch, your customers, your vendors, your suppliers, government. You want to really be thinking about a culture of inclusion. And if you've done that, these are going to be the critical steps that you'll take to design your culture. Establish them, put flags in the sand, and be very clear. Prioritize engagement because that relates to the employee experience. Prioritize coaching in the moment, catching your employees doing a great thing or not so great, and how we go about getting them to realize their potential and be their best selves. Put a flag in the sand around beliefs, put a flag in the sand around shared responsibility. Is it a matrix organization or is it a gold watch hierarchical organization? These all contribute to what a culture can blossom and grow to be when you think about it fundamentally as a tree, and how each of those things is central to making your company better tomorrow than it was yesterday. Things also to understand: board of directors, how they interrelate with the work that you do. You may or may not have one. You may or may not be on one, having been on one. They're all different. There's 3 different types. But the idea of a board of directors is to ensure, guide, develop, and establish some goal alignment. Back to that, remember the mission, vision, the MVP roadmap. Very intimately involved in all of that design from the top. CEOs and senior leaders define, cultivate, strategize, prioritize, and then redefine and design the organization from those principles that are jointly shared and owned. HR compliance ethics, middle managers, employees, they implement, advise, consult, affirm, and feedback. How you know you did well? Remember process improvement. Optimization is different than management because you've added that element of process and continuous improvement. Any thoughts? I'm going to pause here. Any thoughts on what I said? Because now I'm going to move into our next session and then our final session. But before I do, any thoughts about what I shared already around MVVP and people? What you thinking? Yes, sir.
So do you recommend, even for startup company, to actually come up with some kind of mission, vision statement
Yes,
up front?
yes. I think in the development phase, it's not just product development, it's people development. So you have to have that early. So you hire right. Great question. So actually, it's in your development phase as you lay down your vision. And from there, your purpose will be established as well. Kind of 2 different things. And in the middle, gets teased out and changed through continuous and process improvement across the life cycle. Excellent question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Question. Thank you. A lot of nice ideas. I just want to know, you mentioned the startup phase, DHRO is something you might recommend. Roughly, do you have an idea at what kind of size of a team you might recommend a specific person in charge of that, rather than, once we start like 5 people, you probably just have someone take the role, but not having the title.
That's right. So I think I understand your question to be, I've said very specifically, bring in your C-suite type people in that startup phase. And I mean that might be the only employees you have. But I also said, that's where you start to begin thinking about your outside service providers. That's where you lay down the design. Because here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to quickly hire people and you haven't even figured out your culture. You haven't figured out the right reason for hiring in the first place. You can't, people always say, HR has to write me a job description. And I say, nope, right? I don't write job descriptions. But I do ensure that we have the competencies built to hire right. So you got to write the job description and you can't do that. So that's why I said, your question is great. Those may be known to be employees, but that's the kind of work that's happening in some kind of fundamental way. It may or may not be funded, and the person may bring it with them. A hands-on sort of startup CHRO would be able to do that pretty easily. And the triumvirate would talk about it and be involved. Is that helpful?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there a role in there maybe to bridge the gap between that full-time person, employee type person, and nobody, where a consultant or a company that provides those things for you just to get your feet off the ground?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, in development, I'm hired a lot of times in the development and startup phase. So one of the, I'm usually bridged into it. And I have 2 private clients in Cincinnati and 1 in New York. It's exactly what I started off when they were sort of saying, okay, we know we need a CHO, we get it. But we also want to be able to keep our pulse, because it was COVID, right? Everything was just nuts. So we want to keep our pulse on how we communicate things. So in this case, one was a communication concern. So yes, a consultant becomes very important. And again, you should be able to fund that even in the development phase. And you'll find many people like me, that's what we're doing more and more. We're asked to do that more and more, to sit in and say, hey, listen, looking at what now that I understand where you want to go, I'll take them through a 3-day strategic session and we'll build the MVVP together. And now I can be a consulting partner, or anybody really, once you have that right there.
As well as kind of providing all that, there's that paperwork, you're making all of your procedures and, all those things
That's
that
right.
go around that
Yep, and there's templates, like, so I'm a consultant practitioner, but I'm enrolled with McKinsey. I'm enrolled, like I have that service for you. You don't have to do it. I'll do it.
Right.
And there's templates that are designed that make that.
For that whole starting kind of package before you
That's
go
right.
out to try and hire that first person.
That's right. It's a kit. We call it a talent search kit.
Okay.
Along those lines, so the CHRO, when you're just, 5 employees is probably overkill, right? And because it's not, it doesn't, at least to me, it doesn't seem like it's enough work for a full-time,
That's right.
senior position.
That's right, because we're waiting for that product to be a product.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess it would be a consultant initially and then eventually,
Yep, I think I actually displayed that. Let's take a look at it again. Yeah, man, keep up with me. I'm fast. That's exactly what we're saying. So if you look at the C-suite and then consultants is underneath. That's what I'm describing, contract, not even contractors, consultants.
Even like a fractional, I think that's is that what you're trying to say? Like a fractional sort of CHRO?
Yeah.
Full time.
Yeah, so, thank you. So remember I said FTE, PTE, maybe it's only 20 hours. I'm a consulting CHRO for 2 companies at once. Why am I able to do that? Well, because they're on a journey.
does that individual also help with issues like, say in this day and age, you have people working from different states and there's different tax issues, right? And that sort of thing.
Yep. So at this early stage, you're not really doing payroll per se. You're doing what we call professional fees. You're paying on contracts, because even though you have a 3 C-suite executives defined, they're likely on a contract 2-year. And it ties to the mission and vision to get to the next stage. Usually when I, am in these contract situations, I design it so that I'm compensated differently given on the phase of life cycle.
But would that individual help with the employees who may be based in different states too?
Yes, if that's the
Those
case.
tax issues.
Yeah, you'll need it. And again, there's templates. So I happen to know a lot, and that's not good. Trust me, it's not good because things change all the time. But having those connections to Society of Human Resources Management, having yourself, that's what a good consultant practitioner would do. They would be able to advise to your payroll department. ADP does it on their own, and they come back to you, and you have your HR person that you have on contract to consult with ADP and get that right. But it is important. I'm glad you mentioned taxes and tax statuses and right to work states, and there's just a lot there that you need an ear whisperer for earlier. It may determine where you put a manufacturing plant, if you're doing a brown field or a green field, right? We've done a lot of that. The tax laws are everything. Way back when, I worked for a company called WL Gore, and anyone who skis Gore-Tex. So that's that company. And I was the head of plant for HR, and we decided that it was cheaper. They do 1 million inventions, so it wasn't the Gore-Tex plant, but it was another, if you pick up your smartphone, there's a clean room inside your smartphone. Gore invented that. So I was the HR for that widget, building that component. It was built in Malaysia. And we made the decision that we needed to cut the cost by perhaps moving our manufacturing to China. This was 20 years ago. A big bold move, wasn't it? And I was at that table. When the decision was made to look at the model, they brought HR into the room immediately. Why do you suppose that is? Think about building a manufacturing plant in China. Why would you bring HR in? You know you need to have this guy in the room, your engineer, I'm building a plant. But why would you want HR right away? What would be the value?
You need to figure out if you're gonna have people do it, right?
The right people.
You need to figure out if you're gonna have right, because it's something we talk about a lot here in Houston, constantly. We talk about the accelerator, at least from our perspective, and what can we do to help you all? The conversations inevitably head towards can we find the right people, because we're still a smaller growing ecosystem.
Exactly right.
That's why we have secrets.
And then if you have a country like China, who plays interestingly, I'm just going to say that, you really need to understand what province in China makes sense for you. And so a great HR person will be able to get that information and connect to their network. to figure
What
it
is
out.
the cultural difference?
That's the
What you
third
think is
reason.
gonna work with your employees in the United States and you try to take it somewhere else and it blows up and.
And then there's other factors. Remember, you have a culture, and you'd like to bring that, your business culture into that plant. But it may not be possible, one size does not fit all. And so you need to adjust and figure out what you can live with. By the way, in the end, we never moved. Because the senior leadership team decided that the political climate, and at that time, they were saying that you could only have 2 swings at the plate to have children, because they didn't want girls, they did not value girls. So you were given a shot to have 2 boys, a boy. If you had a boy the first time, then you could have an abortion and then be done. And our company decided we didn't want to be in that. Now, they've since evolved, not like that now, but it was very much like that then. They also did things like they didn't want our benefits packages because they didn't think the nicotine patch was necessary for women. Only men could have it. Extending a man's life is more important than extending a woman's life. So walk away. Culture.
I have a question for you. When you talked about establishing culture very, very early and being very thoughtful about building your team. How are you seeing people implement culture? Maybe this is what you're going to get to in the later part of your presentation, in a increasingly remote or virtual sort of setting.
So that's why I said I almost brought in a new slide. So I'm going to talk from my research because that's what I'm being asked now, right? Because, I remember being asked, okay, we built one of my clients built a huge $6 million facility pre-COVID. And then of course, nobody's in the office. So they couldn't get people back fast enough because in their mind, return on investment was having a full building. Think about that. We built this building and there's nobody in it. So we got to get our return on investment to get people in it. So they got to come from the house. That's it. They got to 22% of people quit immediately. Now, I gave them that consultative thought. I said, now, listen, I want you to think about this decision. This is a tough one. I get you. Like, I'm a businesswoman. I ain't mad at you. Except that you need to explain to the people how you lost money when they work from home. And in fact, you didn't. You made money. A lot of money. So while there's this albatross over here called $6 billion, you still have to create a value proposition for your employees. And so now that's why we see hybrid working being the way to go. You're going to see the trend more and more to hybrid working. Now, this creates an ecosystem imbalance that you'll have to think about because the commercial property, commercial real estate now is in risk. Because what are you going to do with it? Can you sublease it? Can you get somebody else in the building? That's counter to your own philosophy. Yes.
Let me ask sort of like a political incorrect question. So of course we know the importance of people, the HR management, but I think this kind of cultural thing is very quick, right? So it's at different stage you might have different culture. I mean, at early stage you want to quick development, right? Quick development, and maybe you want to just like Elon Musk said, well, people work at 3 o'clock in the morning. And,
Yes.
You really want people to work. To get a thing doing. But at a later stage, when you have more people, and then you think about, okay, the culture, we need to take care of people's life and, balance of work and life. When it's growing even bigger, like when you have 20,000 people, we feel that actually most of the time, the HR part, they are bureaucratic problem.
It can feel
Instead of facilitating development, actually slow down. Of
You
course, it's the robust of the culture, everything. So, but what do you think of this kind of
concept is this conundrum. Isn't it?
balance and,
So you use the word bureaucratic. So I just want to make sure we're aligned on what you mean by that. What does bureaucracy mean to you?
well, for example, you want to buy something. If you have only 3 people, you say, okay, we agree. So, snap, and you buy it the next hour, next 3 minutes. When you have like a whole HR, you have to put all of the level of approval, maybe it takes 3 months.
So what are you buying? What's the something? I'm still not clear how
You just
HR is
buy
involved in the
buy
purchase
a
decision.
computer or buy a reagent or buy anything.
A reagent, okay. And HR blocks it?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, yeah. I mean,
How-
because you
how
get
is-
all of these approval, like, okay, first you get maybe your you know, your manager, and then your HR, and then your up level, and it's a lot.
So when you're at 20,000 people, I just make sure I have your story, your scenario set for me correctly. 20,000 people, you have HR business partners embedded in the business,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're part of the leadership team, right? And Enrique hung out in leadership teams together, and they're one of many voices around the table, and the decision to buy a reagent is perceived to be held up by HR.
I'll just throw an example.
Okay, and that's why I want to say that's a perception. So HR gets a bad rap. So let me talk, if you don't mind me, sort of, that's a live feeling that you have. But I have to say that feeling is not unfamiliar. I've certainly been on the other side of that. But I can tell you the decision to buy the reagent is not HR's. The decision to fund the reagent is not HR's. But if you say you need 45 people because you bought the reagent, then it's HR's. Because you said you need 45 people, and I want to optimize your talent. That's what I'm here for, to help you optimize your talent. So the real number may be 22, and the opportunity to promote from within some of those women that you haven't promoted into those roles. Now we're looking at a different way to make your reagent work. That's the only time you'll see a true HR business partner get involved, when because you did that, you now have boxes to draw. And so we're going to help you optimize it. It may feel slow because you don't appreciate the things I'm talking about today, why it's important to have the right people in the right roles at the right time for the right reason. Exactly why I'm talking to you about this now. This is true with 2 employees or 42,000. Still true, because great places to work avoid those retention measures we talked about. And that costs you money too. Helpful?
Yeah. Yeah, I just echo a couple of points. So I'm a founder of a company, Recruitment Therapeutics. I started from point number 1. I ran a site of 12 people, all in R&D therapeutics focus, and then now we're like about 70 headcount.
Congratulations.
2 sites, Dallas and then
Congratulations.
early on, culture, I think what it, really boils down to when you've got 3 or 4 scientists in the room is really having a clear understanding of like roles and responsibilities and the goals, and make sure that the team has, all of that information to feel comfortable with the vision of what you're going to do.
It connects you to it.
When we got big, then we brought in the external folks to position, and you'll go to this workshop and fill out surveys, and some of it's useful, a lot of it, people sometimes don't feel comfortable sharing that way, and so there's still a balance of setting culture that actually matches with like what the boots on the ground actually feel, and it's really those people who want to check in like constantly to make sure that if your guys are, you've got a milestone coming up, you need data, like, you can't just leave them in the dark. And so I would say, right, when you're at least in the field of like therapeutics and all that, where you're developing, you have scientists, it's culture then is really, just what that work environment feels like, and that making sure that they're comfortable, you can have a clear, like there's a singular point of accountability, that's the leader, whoever that is, but you don't want to do things in the dark, and the more you can make you feel inclusive in that process, if you're developing whatever your roadmap is.
Yep.
They're gonna have buy-in to what you're developing, and I think it's.
And the earlier you're talking about it, it's a normal conversation. If it just comes out of the sky once you're 20,000 people, it's resistance.
So it is
It's a change.
Right. Echo that this is important, but it looks different, I think, as you scale. But you want to do it,
Wash, rinse, and repeat, right? So when you are able to move to the next level, remember I said, depending on where the company is in their life cycle, it depends on what I'm charging and what I'm putting together as a spec as a consultant. Because to your point, it's going to change, but you want it to change. You don't want to lose sight of it. And I'm suggesting the earlier you start, the more routine it feels, because we understand it's a we thing, not a me thing. The tendency for scientists and technologists and STEM type roles to keep their head down and be siloed is high. It's just how you are as a person. That's okay. But this is designed to create a we thing, a great place to work, and an inclusiveness that allows you to avoid those retention costs that could really overcome the value of your business. So leadership It says here, I know my time is moving short, so I'm gonna move through these slides, it's only a few. I do wanna therefore underscore what was just said. Your leadership matters. This is it. This is leadership. It's not just the thing you love. We always gravitate to science and technology because we love it. But this leadership, it's not a position or a title, it's an action. It's an example. It's what you're doing. There's a whole person you're managing to. We have three parts to ourselves. Our IQs, our intellectual quotient. Those are those functional realities of what we like to do and perform and do well. Our SMEness. You see my SMEness, right? I love this stuff. That's that intellectual quotient. It can be learned. It can be developed. Then there's the EQ, which is the emotional quotient. This is your ability to connect to people, connect to what's happening around you, atmospherics and environments. Your emotional intelligence defines your leadership style. It is adaptable, malleable. It understands that people power the process. It gets that. And then, of course, your social skills, your SQ. These are the three elements of you. Your social skills are remember you got a devil and an angel on your shoulder. This is your ethics. This is what's whispering in your ear when. What are your memories, means, values as a person, as a human being? Where does humankind rest for you? This is where your social quotient is involved. So if you're solely the IQ, and a lot of times introverts rely heavily on that, you're creating an imbalanced culture. And so my talk with you today is to say, remember, you play to the whole person, including yourself. You have all three pieces, use them. Why? Because you have optimized outcomes. You'll get these slides later so you can look at this a little deeply. But this is what we call competencies. And these are outcomes that achieve sustainable results, manages conflict, drives engagement, and cultivates innovation. Who's against innovation? Nobody. Okay, good. Right? Cultivates it. Look at those words around this wheel. When you look at how you work with people, you want to optimize diverse talent because our differences make a difference. You want to be able to build collaborative relationships, influence people. That basic, and connecting to others. Your EQ, your SQ, huge here. Then there's yourself, because being a leader is not just a leadership of people, it's a leadership of self and others. So how you lead yourself is as important as how you lead others. And that's what the optimization here is about. Bottom line, great leaders create greater workplaces. Plain and simple. We know this to be true. Be available, give regular feedback, recognize and appreciate individual strengths. Encourage connection and collaboration. Encouraging. Be open to dialogue. The dialogue. Feedback is such, you probably broke out in hives when I said it. It's dialogue. It's a two-way conversation. When I'm at my best, I make you and the environment fill in the blank. That's how I do what I call feed forward. I speak to the impact of what you do well and the detraction of what you can do better. It's a dialogue. All of this leads to the other thing, remember I said, we're looking inside and outside of the organization. Your corporate social responsibility is hugely important here and it must be sustainable. It must be sustainable. It should look at the world through sustainability. The wash, rinse, and repeat. Keep the party going. Pick a word. Gandhi said it best, be the change that you want to see in the world. There's three buckets here, social, environmental, and economic. And as they meet and cross and talk to each other, they're all supremely important. And they feel a little similar to the whole person model that I showed you. The world is designed the same way. So sustainability and balance and this appreciation of social responsibility is important. And my final comments are about an inclusive mindset. What does all this take? Had a great dialogue with my two colleagues in the back, and I appreciate you all. And I said, the sooner you get started on this stuff, the more routine it feels. But none of it works if you don't have an inclusive mindset to begin with. If every conversation you must win, that means somebody has to lose. And that's not building to a leadership potential. And so what I'd like you to start thinking about is the phrasing of an inclusive mindset. There's several articles and references that get into this. Hewitt has done a study. There's not a firm that hasn't. And they've been doing it since 1950 and they keep getting the same result. It's what you think of here that matters. Can't teach you that. You've got to decide. Ken Frazier, the former CEO of Merck, said it best when he was interviewed, first Black CEO in the pharmaceutical industry of a Fortune 10 company. And they asked him, they said, what's the business case for diversity? And he said, if there's a business case for diversity, I'm not going to tell you until you tell me what's the business case for racism. Is there a business case for the opposite? Of course not. So why do we need a business case? What we do need, though, is an inclusive mindset. And each of you have to bring that to the party. And so a word on it. I talked about McKinsey and Company. They do a study. They've been doing it for the last 20 years now. They just released their report. They're now honing in on the gender barriers and parity problems. But here's what they know in the studies that they do with Fortune 100 companies in UK, parts of Europe, Asia, and of course the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And what it says here is outperforming for diverse companies, ones that are truly a diverse company. The likelihood of outperforming industry peers and profitability is increased over time. How many people have heard of the McKinsey study in this area of diversity? Okay, so please look that up. I'll have it in your glossary. Well, you have? Okay, sounds familiar? And they've been doing it for, I laugh, they do it every 2 years. If you think it's gonna look different, it just looks worse. I mean, people still, it emphasizes it over and over again. Your culture and your commitment to differences matter. If you don't want to believe their study, BCG, Boston Consulting Group, in their European quadrants only, did another similar study. And here's what to underscore what I just told you. Here's what they understood. Not enough companies use diversity, different thought, to drive innovation. They hire people that are just like themselves and think that something different is going to happen. They think that they'll move into a high growth curve when everybody thinks just like them. It simply isn't true. Cannot be true. I mean, just go lie. I can show you the numbers, but just think about the logic of that. When you look at the increasing changing of the markets that we're catering to, we need to understand that. Innovation, revenue to diversity, nearly 20% in this study, 20% are both diverse, and they are also innovative, and they show the highest gains. They're doing both. They're concentrating on both things. They're saying, I am going to hire not for fit, for attitude. What's missing? What's missing in my company when I write my job description? That's what I'm going to hire for. And that's going to grow and innovate. Alarmingly, about a third of the companies here, though, are diverse, but they're not innovative because they're not concentrating, they're not connecting the two. Remember those stats I showed you earlier? People can do more, they want to do more, but nobody's asking them. They're sitting there, but nobody's asking them of them because the silos at the top have made the decisions. Don't be that company. And then 40% have the lowest revenue gains and no significant, significant regular gains. So they're stagnant. 40% of them. They're not moving at all. The thing about this international survey to understand is that diversity is defined what we call the Blau index. The Blau index is about whatever the majority, racial or gender or both, is in play in that country. So it's not specifically about black and white, it's about majority. And that's important, by the way, because our differences make a difference. Dynamics around inclusion are critical for a differentiation. Companies that lead on diversity have taken bold steps to strengthen inclusion, and these are the things that they do. Bold steps. I'd like to one day do this slide and say it's not bold anymore, it's just what we do. Wouldn't that be nice? But they're bold today because most companies aren't doing it, because if they were doing it, we would be here talking about it. There's no easy button, but it is a mindset. Some quick things about our companies, our clients, our customers, things to understand about the shift of the world. Changes in family living arrangements. In 1960, 73% of the homes were two parents, first marriage, yay! 1960, that's what it looked like, that was the world. 1980, It reduced 61%. 16% were two parents in a remarriage. Blended families. Cohabitating parents, 19%, ooh, up from 9%. And then single parent or no parent. Those homes started to increase. Sorry, that's me. All right. And then in 2018, you're at 46% of the homes are that traditional home, the Leave It to Beaver home, June I'm home, right? 46% are falling into that so-called bracket. But look what has changed. Cohabitating parents. It's a real scenario. Why is this important? Because these are your employees. That's what they look like. So if you're thinking, June, I'm home, that's not what's happening today. So are you really taking advantage of the differences that are in front of you? Difference of new thinking. Workforce USA 2025, here's what's going to look like. Us baby boomers are just sailing off into the sunset. And when they go away, who's going to be left? Rodrigo's going to be left. And if we haven't transferred the knowledge, like Enrique said before, what are we doing? So why is it called a risk when you take a fresh out of school and put them through an accelerator program to accelerate their leadership and then make them the head of the department, give them the support that they need? Why is that a risk? I propose to you, if you don't do it, you're gonna have a big fat hole in about 10 years. Those are your employees. Pay, equal pay for equal work, still talking about that. God, can you believe that? What? So this is what it looks like, women and men. And when we break it further by the gender intersectionality of race and culture, this is what it looks like. For every dollar a white male will make, 90 cents for Asian women, 79 cents for white women, 62 cents for Black and African American women, 57 cents for Native women, and Latina at 54. Is a woman really half the value of a man? Something's wrong. So remember I said earlier, I talked about that's one of the people perceive they're getting paid fairly. Well, yes, it is, ma'am. Thank you for asking. It increased over COVID, interestingly enough, sadly. I was hoping to see something different, but it's not. So it's been increasing over the last 5 years. The gap has. As much as we have women in high places, we have more women CEOs than we've ever had. But what's happening in those companies? Not all that different than what you see here.
Those CEOs get paid less too, though.
Yes, they do. And remember what I said earlier? Yeah, I negotiated a 100% increase when you were already 200% behind the market. To a man. So it felt good. It was an easy win for the company. Woo! I'm gonna give her $3.8 million. She's happy. But her male counterpart, Fortune 10 company, is making 10.8. Underrepresentation in clinical trials. I know you all are in this accelerated medical world. This is real. And if I go to it, I have 3 more of these. I have one for India, I have one for UK, but you get the idea that our trials are not representative of the customers we want their money. I want to sell you my medicine, but I didn't test on you. You weren't important enough. I'm not in the sub-Saharan region. I'm not in parts of Southeast Asia doing clinical trials. It's too hard, it's too expensive, it's too. You already think we're easy. This has to change. Disabilities, ethnicity, and race. This is what we know. This is a US one. This is the US Census sort and the NIH. This just came out. Again, these are all post-COVID stuff that I'm showing you. And so 3 in 10 have a disability for the Native American and the indigenous peoples. 1 in 4 in Black have a disability, 1 in 5, 1 in 6, 1 in 6, 1 in 10. And remember, this is people who admit it. People who tell us, who speak of their disability. We know that people of color do not speak of it because they believe they'll be held to a even lower standard. Prevalence of adult mental illness by race, there you have it. Hispanic adults living with mental health conditions, 16.3%. White adults, 19.3%. Black adults, 18.6, 13.9 for Asian adults, and 28.3 are in our indigenous group. It's important to understand that these numbers are real. And again, these are the ones that are reporting it. We know that many are not. LGBTQ plus. Important to understand, the bottom line is the impact of being different garners a significantly higher occurrence of reported mental health occurrences that are complicated further by discrimination. Ruchika Tulsayan, who I had the pleasure of interviewing in a women's conference about 2 months ago, major author in this work, and she has authored on the subject of inclusion on purpose. She too agrees with me and many others that your mindset is the deal here. And so, very simply put, the problem isn't men, it's patriarchy. It's the radical edge of being right, being first, being best. The problem isn't white people, it's white supremacy. The problem isn't race, it's racism. The problem isn't straight people, it's homophobia. Recognize these systems of oppression before letting individual defensiveness paralyze you from building a culture of inclusion. I have that last part. Remember I said it's your mindset that matters. So if I'm gonna close it down for you, you see some things popping up and my camera's in the way, but these are the things that I've talked about today in my conversation with you that make the whole person become that leader from the front, that leader of action and in doing. The ability for you to be able to put these things in motion and in play is as important as your product, your idea, your innovation, your shareholder value. If you put shareholder value over your employee value, you've created a dangerous misharmonization. I didn't even say balance, because I'm not going to put that pressure on you. One has to be up here, one has to be down here, and you got to keep doing that. Just seek to harmonize through thoughts of inclusion in all that you do. Inclusive work. Have I looked at everything today? And make sure people are on the list. And do that by yourself. And so I leave you with a message from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they honestly never will forget how you made them feel. That is the end of my remarks. I think we're at time, we're pretty close.
About 15 minutes.
Awesome, so I'll take any more questions or thoughts, please, I'd love to do that. Ideas, how did what I say feel? Because I don't know how it made you feel, no, just kidding.
Honest question, I think that's awesome. So, I thought you had some really powerful statements towards the end of your presentation about trying to increase not just diversity inclusion, but also making sure that you're being equitable when you do that. And at the very beginning, you said only about 15% of workers think that they're being paid fairly. How do you both promote people being compensated correctly? Because of course your board's always like, don't negotiate against yourself, right? I think it's a common thing I've heard a lot of times, right? But similarly also help convey that value, even if you are in a cash-strapped position, to make people feel like they're being valued and pay them for it.
So thank you, and thank you for making that connection. I was hoping you caught it. Somebody caught it because that's a deliberate connection. It's a business value, not a business case. You've got to shift that mindset to the value of a human rights issue. And that's why this is a conversation that has to keep happening, And I've crafted it for you to think exactly like Sarah just said. So how do we reconcile it? If the culture of inclusion is at the forefront of what you decided in the development and pulled through to the startup and then pulled through into the next phase and the next phase and the next phase, what should board look like? They gotta look like that too. So the mindset change begins early with you as the driving force, as an entrepreneur. So when you pick board members, when you decide to sit aboard even yourself, you're bringing that different mindset and this reality of our differences make a difference. And that we've paralyzed our potential. Citibank, I had a little slide, I just didn't have time to send it. Citibank has again completed a study that they've been doing every 10 years since 1930 1930, and they have now risen the number to $3 trillion has been left on the table because of the disproportionate way that we hire, treat, advance, and promote people of color and women. $3 trillion that the UK, US indicate. Think about $3 trillion. It includes some of the things that I just talked about here, the cost of churn, the cost of not being foresighted enough to do wash, rinse, and repeat and do continuous improvement. To not be a leader who's interested in being curious on how I can be better tomorrow than I was yesterday. So it is, how do you do it? You shape it early with things that you have no mas, no more. We're not going to do that way anymore. No longer is the gold watch important to the workforce. I showed you that statistic. So why are you treating them like it should? No longer is loyalty the lead gun for the great work. Your A employees have an average time of 3 years at a company and they're off to the next one. They get their promotion and they're raised somewhere else, not with you. When I coach my leaders and my coachees to interview for the next job or whatever they're doing to move their career along, I teach them how to interview right back. And you do that, talking about this stuff here. The culture you're going into is as important to the intellectual satisfaction of your sweeness. I didn't say one was more than another. I said they have to be as important. Because when you start saying one has to be better than the other, you're setting the stage for business case. I want financial results. No, it's just simply important. Yes, sir.
I would recommend for companies who are, just starting out that, don't have a lot of capital that to help work through leveling or salary bands, leveling. I mean, not all can get Radford's data, and there's all of these things that you can do, right? But there are metrics out there. How would you, encourage a young company to get that so they can be equitable? Right?
Yep. Oh, I love this question. So I want to answer. I have two ways I'm going to answer it. One is the Google machine. There ain't a thing on here I didn't pull that didn't come from the Google machine. I'm just saying. So remember I said be curious? Even as a CEO in the development phase, and you can't fund, an HR partner like me. Okay, fine. But you can ask them to do something transactional for you because the Google machine works. And I just had that happen with my Cincinnati client. They said, Susan, can you give me the latest information on retention now that COVID's over? And that's one of the slides you saw in the presentation. So they hired me just for that. They have, that little gun there. My per hour, billable was just for that one thing. And then they, because they have the culture of inclusion already laid down, are using it. I just got a call to say, can you come back in September? Let's start doing succession planning. And they just bought 4 companies. So this is a company that went from 300 when I met them to 3,000 by acquiring companies. We'd love that. That company. He's like, no more. Helpful? Yes, sir.
I like the word you mentioned that, as a company, you focus on the working for the employee rather than your stakeholder. But I feel, maybe it's my personal feeling, I feel in reality, for most of the companies, particularly for commercial companies, they focus on more on the stakeholder instead of.
Sure. They do. That's why I'm here to, I'm suggesting to you to flip the script and to make both equally important. Wow, I did that all my, you see that as my bad angle? And I did great. Come on, round of applause for Susan. I need that. I've been working on my balance. I haven't been able, I just learned how to do that 2 weeks ago. Make sense? I'm not here to challenge that. That's totally true. But I'm here to say that the future of the world is changing. I showed you the metrics. Can't continue that way. Return on investment for the stakeholder has to have 2 dimensions. And the companies who are doing it right in the McKinsey study are doing that. Their retention numbers are much lower for a reason, because they've made the decision that they're as important. I didn't say one's more important than the other. They're as important.
I mean, is there any data showing that, okay, so these
Yes.
companies give these.
Yes, whatever you're going to say, I'm saying, yes, there's data, but people do what they want to do. And whatever you're getting ready to say next, I promise you there's data that shows And I can tell you some of them off the top of my head. I gave you the 3 trillion number. There's a lot more in that tech. I think about 3 trillion being left on the table. How are you able to quantify that number? Well, that's why I said to you, yes. There's plenty of data out there that says doing the right things in the right way has value in terms of retention. Retaining your great workers, developing them is a commitment to developing a workforce, a we culture, not a me culture. A me culture is looking only one-dimensionally, monochromatically at shareholder value and ignoring the greatest stakeholder of them all, people. And I mean literally ignoring them. They're okay with churn and burn. They know they're going to write off $70 million of turnover. They're okay with that. But the next generation isn't. 22% of people quit instantly when they said they had to go back into the office in one of my clients. And they weren't just, Manny, Mo, and Jack. They were your top knowledge people balancing their children and deciding I'm going to harmonize them and I'm going to find a company that's willing to play ball with me. And more companies that are in this field of which I'm speaking to you about, they're doing it. PepsiCo has made some very hard decisions very recently. IBM is about to make some very tough decisions. They're a client of mine about this harmonization issue. Not balance. I'm not saying that, and I encourage you not to say that. I also encourage you not to say change management. I want you to say change system. It's a systemic concept. The only thing certain about change is change. So why are you managing it? It's going to manage you if you do that. That's something that should sound familiar. It's oldie but a goodie for me and you. It's transformation. You can't be what you were when June came home, clutching her pearls and saying meatloaf's on the table. It's not like that today. It just isn't. You can't run your company that way either. Yes, sir.
Thanks for the advice, and I understand when we have hundreds of people, a lot of money, diversity, equity, all these things. So many of us, we are starting with 1 or 2 or 3 things. Do we care about all those things or find the right talent where we can drive our product to the next level? Then when we make money, then we can diversify, or we should start diversifying now. I can't find the right technical person which is diverse than talent. What is that advice?
Welcome to the world of the executive suite. Congratulations. You have to now harmonize your business priorities with your profitability. But what one thing is constant in both of them? Right people, right roles, right time, right reason. So that's why I say harmonize. If you're constantly thinking about the value of bringing, like you're looking for that one great talent now, that's a people decision because you're not just bringing the first clown that walks through the door. You're going to now think about the future of your company and have some very defined principles on what that human being looks like. I don't care if they're an introvert. What I do care about is do they care about me, people, products, saving lives? Do they care about anything? Or do they want to be this person? I don't want those people in my company. Because those are the people that are going to play to the profit and ignore innovation. Because money's money, right? Profit, if I could show 3% growth, for 30 years, woohoo! And oh, by the way, give me $1 million every time I give you that 3%. Because that's what's happening. Is that what you want to be? You can do that. What I'm telling you, listen, if this was easy, I'd be out of job. This is not easy. But it also isn't rocket science in the sense that it's not a political issue. It's not a profit issue. It's a human issue. Your humanity, your employees' humanity, your vendors' humanity, your suppliers' humanity, your customers' humanity. Your communication style, the way you talk to people about things, has to have humanity first. You have to be open to criticism. You have to be able to hear that tough question that challenges your thinking. But you need a consistent culture to answer that question. What culture are you promoting? Remember, I told you, one of them said, listen, I'm not coming back because I know for a fact you didn't lose any money by us working from home. In fact, we got more efficient. I know this for a fact. So you're only sending me back home because you want a building full. because you want to justify your business case for investing $6 billion into that facility. There's a way to do it though. They still could do it. It just changes the way. And so we did come up with a solution. So we have rotating teams that come in, lab workers rotate. So every 6th week, you work home for 3 weeks. So 6 in, 3 weeks out. 6 in, 3 weeks out. So each department was given that. And so that's why the name of the game today is flexible working. Don't think about hybrid working, forget that. And remote working, that's just nuts. Flexible work. That's the decision a culture of inclusion will commit. And they're open to anything. They want to hear what the employees think is important for them. Yes.
Yeah, you talk about the diversity and innovation, right? The diversity drives innovation. Can you elaborate what innovation is that?
Yeah, so now these are studies, I'll just refer to the BCG studies if you don't mind. One of the things about, there's a whole section on what innovation is. It is relative to the company. Innovation is when they say, remember I told you back in pre-expansion, you're thinking, okay, I'm doing these Cheerios. I'm killing it with the old Cheerios there. I'm killing it. But I now want to have fruit Cheerios, chocolate Cheerios, and granola Cheerios. Don't eat granola Cheerios. Okay. So, but I want those 3 things. The granola Cheerios taste terrible. If I'm able to break into that market, I know that I can get a segment I never had before. So I need to bring in somebody else who isn't doing just oat Cheerios to make that happen. So I make a conscious decision to hire for that person's creativity. I set the stage so they can be. I create think tanks. I have rooms where they're able to have their voice and share and come up with the wildest ideas. I have created a culture where that's okay. And I've created the opportunity for them to try it out. And so now you have better tasting vanilla Cheerios. They're not nasty anymore. Because you've created an opportunity for someone to come in and bring their own creativity and thinking to future ideas. And oh, by the way, now they're chocolate food. And they do, because they're starting with regular food. So what I'm suggesting to you is that you're setting the culture for new ideas to come in that are different than yours. And the only way you're going to do that is to understand that our differences make a difference. Those companies that are in those studies, especially the BCG one and the McKinsey one, that's how they define innovation. I would love to be in this segment, but I don't know where to start. I don't even know how to talk to those people in that segment. And so I'm going to bring in people who look like them, act like them, who have new experiences different. Band-Aid did it. Band-Aid was challenged, and they used to always have nude color Band-Aids. And now they have all skin colors. And they brought in somebody from S.A. Lauder to develop that because they had already designed makeup to do that. And so they innovated the concept of Band-Aids to another level. So it's different for company to company. Does that help?
Right, yeah, and it seems like you, right now you talk about it's one way to diversity in the talent, right? And the people have given expertise to them. So how could I try, for example, the culture diversity or even,
Culture of inclusion. So I would say culture of inclusion, because a byproduct of the inclusive mindset creates automatically diversity. Because you decided whose voice is missing from around this table. What opinion is being shared? Do I have a bunch of yes men, emperors who close sitting around the table? And most of them do, the ones that he was referring to, shareholder focus. Yeah. Or do I have somebody saying, yeah, but, or that isn't going to work for the millennials, because I am one. I'm not a millennial, I'm not. But I'm saying I don't know what's going to appeal to them. When I talk to my nieces and nephews, I'm astonished. Right? And so you should be astonished as a CEO every freaking day. My dad used to say it to us every night. He pushed the bed and say, what did you learn new today? And we still, wow, what is he asking this every freaking night? And finally I got the courage to ask him, and he said, listen, I don't care if you learn that you don't put a black sock with a blue sock or a blue shoe with a black shoe. Anything that you're curious enough to know, you should go out and know it. And if you can't know it yourself, go find. This is before Google. There was no, we didn't know anything about the internet then. Go find somebody that does. And have those people around you. Emperor's New Clothes says I have to give in to profitability through the stock market. And that's the only way I'm going to be successful. Innovative company says no, success has different levers.
And our people powering the process is one of them. Okay, is that overtaking one? It's definitely one of them now. That's a level.
We have time
We're
for
over time, 'cause I gotta make a run to the airport.
Yeah,
That's my next fun.
if it's a quick question. Okay.
I got a 1:13 flight, so how am I doing? Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this is really you mean, insurance. So let's say we talk about the culture and we talk about the retention, right? But let's say, example, you got some people, at the beginning, you don't really know each other, after some time, you know each other. Right? Well, this one is not really fitting the culture very nicely, but, he has been here or she has been here for a long time, we put a lot of resource for training. If we let go, we'll lose the resource and we'll get a new person and then we'll take more time for training and get familiar with the culture. You don't know whether it will be better or not. So during this kind of situation, what are you gonna do?
So are you saying the person's disruptive? I didn't understand. They're a person that's not,
Maybe it's not fitting the culture, fitting not.
right, so it's not, okay. All right, so
You want to cut it off.
you know what I'm gonna say. He knows where I'm going on this one. So listen, we'll put it to you simply. Is anyone totally offended by profanity? I'm not gonna say a horrible word, but I gotta say it this way to make a point. So the question is, do you want a hole or an asshole?
You knew I was gonna say.
So do I have to let you say anymore?
Yeah, okay, all right.
So HR will help you do that. And if you have succession plans in the first place,
Yeah.
this wouldn't be so traumatic. If you're doing a performance management cycle that tells it like it is, this person shouldn't have been here 10 years. This person should either move to a more appropriate situation or out the door. Or out the door. This is why I said you have to make it as important. Disruptions cost you money too, because people around that individual are leaving. If you don't get rid of them, they're gonna get rid of themselves. And they're judging. Remember we said 57% said their manager was responsible. That's an example of that responsibility. You didn't get rid of the hole, that's the other one, the a-hole.
That's really.
So I just can't work with the a-hole anymore. I'm done. I'm out. You won't do it. So I'll do it myself. And it's usually your A people. You're the ones that you really should be targeting for innovation, to drive something new. They're probably holding on something that could really help you. If they're smart enough to see that they're carrying the weight and carrying the water for these a-holes, they're gonna go somewhere else where they're valued and getting paid for it at least. Because you're probably ignoring their effectiveness because this guy's in the way for whatever reason, taking your time, attention, draining, noisy. 10% of your company should be on the chopping block every single year. I didn't say you should chop them. I said you should be looking at them in that way. And then deciding, can you develop them or not? Every company's not for everybody.
And I'd say when you're technical, leave the job more frequently, maybe the question is, the problem is with management, because
Not maybe,
if
it
they
is.
come to you, they don't have access to you. Management has all the way to kind of sort of mediate, they're sort of serving as the middleman. And, so you're not gonna be aware of the problem, but when you currently, always have a turnaround of the same position in the same spot, that should be a red flag that, your management is making people fly away.
That's right. And we look to the C-suite for that. That's why C-suite succession plans are done every 2 months in our recommendation. And we talk about literal names and people. We don't give what ifs or any of that. People's names are hitting the board that are in that low 10% and top 10%. That's their succession plan. Everybody in the company, and I've done it with companies with 50,000 employees. And if it takes 3 days, it takes 3 days. What you talk about. You ask how you set the stage for change, for transformation. That's it. You're talking about at the highest levels of the organization, of which you all are going to be in control of. So do it.
That's a wonderful note. But I want to make sure you catch your plane. So.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.